Welcome to Crime Line. I'm Angela, and thank you for joining me. Tonight, we're stepping into a domestic tragedy that unfolded in Albuquerque, New Mexico, the death of Air Force Major Mark Herrera. What began as an apparent suicide in the couple's master closet following a late-night party quickly unraveled into a perplexing investigation. His wife, Amy Herrera, admitted her finger was on the trigger of the .45 caliber pistol, but her story of how it got there and why it fired would shift and twist, leading investigators and a jury down a complex path. Was this a coerced act, a calculated murder, or a desperate move of self-preservation? Mark Herrera was an Air Force major stationed at Kirkland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, serving with the 550th Special Operations Squadron when he began dating Amy Collins. At the time, Amy was married to T.J. Collins and was employed by the University of New Mexico's Department of Family and Community Medicine. She and her then-husband had relocated to the area while he was pursuing graduate studies at the university. In May 2009, at the age of 27, Amy's first marriage ended in divorce. Just under 2 years later, in February 2011, Amy and Mark Herrera were married. Their marriage would last a mere 16 months. In 2012, Major Mark Herrera was 38 years old, and his wife Amy was 30. They shared a home in Albuquerque, near the junction of Guantanamo and Eubank. The couple had 2 dogs, but no children, a point that was reportedly a source of some friction between them. Mark was keen on starting a family, while Amy was said to be less enthused about the prospect. There was another noticeable strain on their marriage. In June 2011, just a few months after they wed, Mark was accused of harassment at work. A joke he made had offended a female officer, an incident deemed serious enough for the Air Force to strip Mark of his earned promotion to lieutenant colonel. Friends indicated he was taking this disciplinary action in stride, but it was undeniably a significant hindrance to his military career. Regardless of these private struggles, publicly, the couple appeared to be quite happy and were described as very easygoing people. They even hosted an Ecuadorian exchange student in their home through a program with the University of New Mexico. To many, they were the picture of a seemingly perfect couple, the accomplished pilot and the pretty, successful career woman. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Robin Gallant noted that the two seemed quite affectionate with each other. They both enjoyed socializing and liked to party. Mark was described as a jovial drinker, never prone to violence, while Amy was known as a woman with a remarkably high tolerance for alcohol. Air Force Master Sergeant Carlos Garcia characterized the couple as fun-loving, describing Mark as reliable and trustworthy, and Amy as funny. Neighbors, too, saw them as a normal and quiet couple with no outward signs of distress or aggression in their marriage. One neighbor recalled, "They were a very quiet couple. They said hello when I saw them. She would go to work. He would go to work. Never heard any noise around the house or the backyard." The night of June 30th, 2012. Mark and Amy were hosting a party at their home for a group of exchange students from the university. By all accounts, everyone had been drinking. Mark's drink of choice was Jack Daniels and cola, while Amy was reportedly enjoying multiple double shots of coconut rum with a few of the students. As the party wound down in the early morning hours, around 3 or 4 a.m., the students were invited to stay over. They were consciously separated by gender into different bedrooms. This is where the atmosphere of the evening took a dark turn. Mark became upset when he discovered a male student chatting with female students in an upstairs bedroom. Apparently, not in their designated separate rooms. In an attempt to force them to separate, Mark grabbed a loaded .45 caliber pistol and pointed it at the male student. Amy, alerted to the commotion by other students, rushed to the room. She managed to get in between Mark and the male student, de-escalating the volatile situation. She told Mark to put the gun down and go to their master bedroom, which he did. From this point, The accounts of what transpired next, particularly inside the master closet, begin to diverge significantly. What is clear is that an argument erupted between Mark and Amy. According to Amy's initial version of events, she was in their walk-in closet taking off her earrings when Mark entered after her. She claimed he pushed her to the floor, sat on top of her, and aimed the gun directly at her face. "I thought he was going to shoot me," she stated. "I was absolutely sure." Then, according to Amy, when he didn't shoot her, he put the gun into his own mouth. Next, she said, he put the gun into her hand, insisting that she was going to be the one to do it. "And then I pulled the trigger," she recounted. A 911 call was subsequently made, and officers from the Albuquerque Police Department, the APD, arrived on the scene to assess the unfolding tragedy. When police arrived, they encountered a distressing scene. A group of foreign exchange students were crying and attempting to speak to officers in broken English, urgently, stating there was a victim upstairs in the closet. Officers noted that Amy had visible blood on the front of her clothing and on the back of her legs. They found Mark Herrera on his knees, slumped over in a face-down position inside the master closet. A field investigator was called to the scene. Given Mark's active Air Force status, an Air Force investigator was also present, conducting an independent inquiry. In addition, a medical investigator was requested. According to initial medical reports from the scene, what happened to Mark Herrera appeared to be self-inflicted. Based on this preliminary assessment, the decision was made not to initiate a full violent crimes call-out, which would have involved a larger, more specialized team. Investigators at the scene questioned Amy and examined the bruises she had. They attempted to compare other physical evidence against her version of events. However, critically, Amy's hands were not tested for gunpowder residue, a standard procedure in shooting investigations, and she never underwent a toxicology screen to determine her own level of intoxication or if any other substances were involved. The scene, from the outset, was largely treated as a suicide. An autopsy was conducted on Mark Herrera on July 2nd, the first full day following the call-out to the house party. It confirmed that Mark had a blood alcohol level of 0.23, which is extremely high, nearly 3 times the typical legal limit for driving in many places. The autopsy also noted injuries including cracked teeth and a laceration the length of his tongue. Most notably, however, there was no obvious soot found in Mark's mouth. This finding was significant, as it suggested that the gun was not actually placed inside his mouth when it was fired, a detail that contradicted Amy's initial statements. On the same day as the autopsy, a search warrant was issued for the Herrera home. When the APD arrived to execute the warrant, they found that the house appeared to have been thoroughly cleaned. The gun involved in the incident was located. The closet where the fatal altercation took place had been completely emptied of its contents. It was later discovered that Air Force personnel had entered the home earlier in the day and had assisted Amy, at her request, in cleaning the home and clearing it out, an action that could have potentially compromised the integrity of a crime scene. On July 3rd, APD Detective Holly Anderson contacted Amy to request a formal interview, to which the young widow agreed. The interview took place at the law enforcement center. During this interview, Amy told the detective that Mark had, in essence, committed suicide. "Well, it was my finger, thumb, but he did it," she stated, again asserting that the gun was in his mouth when the trigger was pulled. She elaborated that Mark was holding her wrist with one of his hands and that they were struggling back and forth. Amy said that Mark insisted that she follow through with it. He was in control, she claimed. When asked whether this control was physical, Amy said no, he was controlling her metaphorically. "She technically shot him," she admitted, but in her view, he shot himself with my finger. Her reenactment of the events during the interview, however, was found by the detective to be inconsistent with her narrative. When asked why Mark would want to force her to do such a thing, Amy offered a chilling explanation. It was, she claimed, the ultimate suffering. To make her pull the trigger was to make her live with that horrific act for the rest of her life. She told the detective it was the last thing she had ever wanted to do. The information gathered from Amy's interview was relayed to the district attorney's office, and the recommendation from the APD was that a further, more thorough investigation be undertaken if possible. However, this recommendation appears not to have been adopted at that time. The death of Major Mark Herrera was formally ruled a suicide, a ruling that stemmed largely from the initial on-scene assessment. In the months following Mark's death, Amy Herrera received a death annuity payout of $100,000. Her husband's life insurance policy, valued at $400,000, was still pending. During this period, Mark's grieving family, particularly his mother, Marion, began to voice their concerns and ask pointed questions about what they perceived as a lack of diligent effort being made in investigating Mark's case. "I want them to do their job," Marion stated, "and I pray that they're doing it well." The Herrera family admitted that they had never really had the opportunity to get to know Amy well. After only a year and a half of marriage, she was, in many ways, still a stranger to them. Troubling details from Amy's past also began to surface in the immediate aftermath of Mark's passing. According to the news outlet KRQE in Albuquerque, it was reported in 2012 that Amy had also lost her first husband, T.J. Collins, to an apparent suicide shortly before her marriage to Mark. The news report stated that Amy was separated from T.J. and on the path to a divorce when his body was found. T.J.'s father, while declining a full interview, told the reporter that his son, who was a University of New Mexico graduate student, was never suicidal. He emphasized that his son's marriage vows, taken 4 years earlier, had meant everything to him, and that he found his son's supposed suicide very strange. Further investigation into this point revealed that the Albuquerque Journal reported in 2015 that court documents showed Amy's divorce from T.J. Collins had been finalized in May 2009, and T.J. had taken his own life less than 2 weeks after that. He was found hanging in his closet, and an autopsy showed he had a blood alcohol level of 0.21. His death was officially ruled a suicide. After concerns were persistently raised by the Air Force investigator and by Mark Herrera's parents about the circumstances of Mark's death, the Albuquerque Police Department eventually assigned a violent crimes detective to re-examine the case. Amy Herrera quickly became the focal point of this new investigation. Detective Anderson, in her reports, noted several critical inconsistencies. The location of blood and brain matter on Amy's purple dress and on the back of her legs, the precise position of Mark's body in the closet, and the significant lack of substantial gunpowder residue in his mouth, for starters, all appeared inconsistent with Amy's evolving version of events. Then, in September 2012, a crucial break came. The first of what would eventually be 3 witnesses came forward to tell police that Amy Herrera had admitted to them that she had killed her husband. This witness stated that Amy confessed. "I shot him." When the witness asked whether she had been forced to do it, Amy's response was reportedly a chilling, "No, I killed him." Amy apparently also expressed a belief that she would not be arrested because she thought the death would be considered either accidental or justified. With this new, damning information, an arrest warrant was issued for Amy Herrera. The warrant was based on the glaring discrepancies in her statements when compared with the physical evidence from the scene. The manner in which the gun was fired, according to forensic analysis, was not consistent with her account. Experts consulted by the police stated that how Mark was positioned in the closet did not align with Amy's claim that he had been on top of her, holding her down. Furthermore, the medical examiner, now with new information and evidence to review, officially changed the ruling on Mark's death, concluding that it was not a suicide, but rather consistent with a homicide. Amy Herrera was arrested on October 11, 2012. However, the path to trial was fraught with legal complications. The prosecutor bungled the first attempt, to get an indictment from a grand jury. Apparently, detectives attempted to demonstrate a theory of the shooting to the grand jury members, a move counter to appropriate grand jury practice. Their attempt at an indictment was consequently thrown out. They needed to try again. A second indictment, this one for second-degree murder, was also tossed out after the state Supreme Court agreed that the prosecution had failed to act in a fair and impartial manner when instructing the grand jury, among other procedural concerns. This second attempt failed primarily because of instructions given to the jury to ignore certain testimony that was potentially key to Amy's defense. The defense had asked that the grand jury be allowed to hear the testimony of a coworker and friend of Amy's, Elizabeth Downs. Amy had reportedly confided in Elizabeth only weeks before the June party that her husband, Mark, had previously attacked her and threatened to kill her. Elizabeth stated that she and Amy had even discussed an escape plan for Amy in the event that she felt it was too dangerous to stay in her home with Mark. Elizabeth testified that Amy told her Mark was drinking a lot. He was getting more violent. He was shoving her on the bed against the wall, and also that he gets the gun. In August 2014, prosecutors once again presented their case against Amy Herrera to a grand jury seeking an indictment. Apparently, the third time was the charm. This time, a 3-day preliminary hearing concluded with Amy Herrera being set for trial on a charge of second-degree murder. But Amy's story had undergone another significant transformation in the intervening years. She no longer claimed that she did not kill her husband or that he had forced her hand in a suicide. Now, her claim was self-defense. Amy asserted that Mark was abusive, that his drinking had escalated uncontrollably, and so had his bad behavior towards her. When asked if she ever went to the hospital due to injuries inflicted by Mark, her response was noted. Following these alleged abuses, she said, she and her friend Elizabeth had mapped out her escape plan. At trial, the testimony of those individuals to whom Amy had allegedly confessed was perhaps the most damning for her case. Stephanie Taylor, whose husband served in the Air Force with Mark, testified that Amy had shocked them during an August 2012 dinner at their home when she casually blurted out details of the shooting. Witness Carlos Garcia also testified that he too had been shocked when, weeks after Mark's death, Amy had called him. She was angry over finding receipts and other evidence indicating Mark had indulged in dating sites and strip clubs. Amy had just opened a credit card bill for Mark and discovered membership fees to Ashley Madison, the notorious dating website for married individuals seeking affairs. "I wish I could kill him again," she reportedly told Garcia. Another witness recounted Amy going into rather graphic detail about what happened, describing it as the truth and explicitly stating that she killed Mark. Amy's defense attorneys painted a picture of Mark's fall from grace in his Air Force career as the catalyst for his growing issues with anger and alcohol. They argued that after Mark was accused of harassment and denied his earned promotion to lieutenant colonel, his bad behavior began to escalate. His career, they claimed, had been seriously derailed, and he'd almost been kicked out of the Air Force, though he was ultimately relieved they didn't. Witnesses for the state countered this narrative, asserting that Mark had taken it all in stride and was happy to be transferred to Kirkland Air Force Base, where he remained a pilot. However, Elizabeth Downs, testifying for the defense, reiterated that Amy had confided in her that Mark was drinking too much and that his actions were indeed worsening. "Liz," Amy had allegedly told her, "he's crazy." The trial lasted through 5 intense days of witness testimony. Closing arguments in the case focused heavily on how many want to thank the jury for their hard work. I know they made the best decision they could. A verdict of not guilty does not change the truth and does not change the facts. I know who murdered my son. I know where she did it, and I know when she did it, and I know how she did it. The jury's verdict of not guilty by self-defense closed the legal case against Amy Herrera. But for Mark Herrera's family, and for many observing this case, the questions linger. Was justice truly served in that Albuquerque courtroom? Or does the full truth of what happened in that closet remain a secret known only to Amy? That's the challenging nature of cases where the lines are so fiercely debated. I'm Angela, and this has been Crime Line. Join us next time as we examine another intricate case.